if you have some hunger that's not being met, you're never going to be able to realize consciousness. Like a theory of human motivation. What thoughts spring to mind when you hear those words? Well, if you're like us, you're probably thinking, wow, that sounds interesting. I'd love to know more about what motivates my actions, and maybe that understanding could help me stop settling for an unfulfilling life. Well, if that's what you're thinking, then you're in the right place. I recently read a white paper titled A Theory of Human Motivation, which I actually have here, written by my main man, Abraham Maslow, of course. Shout out to Maslow. He wrote this white paper almost 80 years ago, believe it or not, in 1943. And this is the paper where he introduced the theories that support the hierarchy of needs, which a lot of people are familiar with. And after reading this paper, I ended up having a lot of questions about some of his theories. And I'm guessing they will be questions that you haven't heard before or haven't considered before. So stick around while Adam and I attempt to answer some of those questions. But before we do, Adam's going to give the formal introduction to the show.
Hello. Okay, well, welcome to Settling's Not an Option. I'm Adam Nebbs, and I'm here with my co-host, Amanda Stanhope. This show is for anyone out there who feels like they've settled for an unfulfilling life, whether you've settled in a relationship, the work that you do, or how you feel about yourself. We're here to tell you that settling is not an option. If you're liking the show, please follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're up to 58 subscribers now. Just round us out to 60, please.
Yes.
If you have any, I just like even numbers. If you have any feedback about the show or want to recommend a topic, you can email us at cheers-to-not-settling@gmail.com. And finally, if you feel so inclined, you can donate to us on Coffee, where we're aiming to buy some new audio equipment. Just shout out to any listeners. It's my birthday on the 2nd of October, and I'm planning to finally buy some lighting equipment and a microphone. So if you want to contribute for my birthday,
yeah, there you go. That's right.
I'm just guilting people now.
Whatever works.
So I'll cover up on the 4 topics that we're going to discuss today. So the first question is our society structured to keep people at the bottom of the hierarchy, which we'll discuss more later? Is the only thing standing between us and consciousness hunger? Is a sick man the product of a sick society? And finally, what does it mean to be self-actualized? And is self-actualization even possible? But I'll throw to Amanda just to talk through.
Some simple questions, as usual.
we only deal with simple questions here. We don't deal with.
I came up with these questions, and I just had to laugh at them because.
They're very us questions.
But we like to talk about this kind of stuff, so we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
All right, but before we do, so I do need to at least make sure everybody who's listening, watching, has a little bit of knowledge about Maslow's hierarchy and to understand what the basic needs are, but also to understand what the role of the hierarchy is, because it's kind of misunderstood a lot of times and it's taught incorrectly a lot of times. So the hierarchy is usually represented as a pyramid. We try to make a pyramid shape here. And at the bottom of the pyramid is the physiological needs, which are like water, air, food, the things you need to stay alive. And then the next level of the pyramid is the safety needs, which are shelter, protection from the elements, law and order would fall into that too. The next level is love and affection and belonging. And that is when you long for a place in your group, but it's both giving and receiving love or affection. And then the next level up is esteem, and that's a high evaluation of yourself, that you feel confident and you have self-respect, but it also is esteem from other people so that you're getting recognition and appreciation from others. And then the top, the pinnacle of the pyramid, of course, is self-actualization. And I just summed that up with a quote from Maslow for now, because we're going to talk about self-actualization more later. But Maslow sums up self-actualization by saying, what a man can be, he must be. This need we may call self-actualization.
It's a good one. Good quote.
I just love this guy.
Yeah.
So, I got to geek out for a minute there.
Yeah.
But there are some misconceptions about the hierarchy that we need to introduce too, because a lot of people think that you have to go up the levels like one by one. That's not how they work. That was not his Maslow's intention when he outlined it. The reason they're in that order, though, is because they're in order of prepotency, which means, and I wrote this down so I remember it. So the greater, okay, so preponent needs have a greater than others in power or okay. So those needs are greater than the others in power or influence. So like your physiological needs have more pull over your motivation and your behavior than the other ones.
Yeah.
That's why they're in that order, but you don't meet one and then you move up to the next. Like you're gonna, everybody kind of will meet part of each one of those normally. Normally you meet some of your physiological needs, some of your safety needs, and so on. The reason I think that he put, and I just kind of talked about it, but that he put the physiological needs at the bottom is because, like I said, they seem to have the most power over your motivation, because he says when you're chronically and extremely hungry, for example, all you can think of is food, and all you can think is, but not even that, but you're motivated to get food because you think if you get food, you will never need anything again. You're like, and you can kind of equate that to other things that you've wanted in your life, and you always think, oh, if I could just get that one thing, I won't ever want it for anything else again. Then of course you get the food, and then you move up to your safety needs, and all you want is safety. And then you get safety, say, and you're like, okay, now all I want is to be loved. And so you just keep moving up that way, and that's why that's what the prepotency means. Does that make sense all the way I'm explaining?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm explaining it very well. But
yeah, no, it's good. Yep.
Yeah, you're like so focused on one. You might be so focused on one at a time, but that doesn't mean you haven't met some of the other ones. And then, and the other, I guess I kind of touched on that, is that the higher needs emerge as you meet the lower needs, and the higher needs will start to emerge. And another important thing that he noted is that not all of your behavior is going to be determined by these basic needs. Like this is just one motivator of your behavior. And so it's not something that you could just use it, I guess, to explain every single person's motivation for doing anything, because there's so many other factors. So that's just a thing in mind too, because other determinants of behavior could be the stimuli that they're exposed to in people's environment, their culture, and all these things are going to affect your behavior as well.
Yeah.
So those are just some basic things to keep in mind before we get into the questions. But do you have any questions on any of that stuff before we move on?
No, well, I mean, Amanda brought up with me ages ago that you don't have to move up each part of the hierarchy one by one. So that was good, because I'd had it in the back of my mind, as a lot of people would, that you do have to move up one by one, but it's not that simple, you know?
That's how it's taught usually, or when you hear it like in a management class or something.
Yeah.
Kind of how it's presented. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, but it's so simple when you think about it. Like if you actually take the time to think about it, it's like, if you're up at that point where you're, at the top of the pyramid and you're thinking about self-actualization, it's like you can have those basic physiological needs any time of the day, because you're like, I'm hungry. So then you come back down the pyramid, or you could be self-actualizing while, eating, like, like that's the thing. When I thought about it that way, I went, like why would you think that you're just locked up in that top part of the pyramid just because you've got there? Like it's far more complicated than that.
And another way he presented it, which made it really easy to understand too, is he's talked about it as, if you think of it as percentages. So like bottom needs would be a higher percentage. Like, so if you've met, say your physiological needs are 50% met, your safety needs wouldn't be more than 50%, more than likely. Like your safety needs then would probably be like 40% maybe, and then your love and belonging would maybe be 30. Like that kind of helps to understand that you can meet each of them in varying degrees, but the bottom ones are probably going to be a higher percentage if you think of it that way.
Yeah, definitely. So, that makes sense.
Yeah, so that helps, I think, too. But all right, so should we get into it here?
I'll start the
Timer
timer.
going.
Yep.
All right. So the first question was, in our society, or is our society structured to keep people at the bottom of the hierarchy? I think I need my reading glasses here.
That's a basic need. See, already you're at the
Yeah,
bottom.
exactly. Well, there we go. My physiological needs are not being met here.
They're not being met.
But what sprung this question was the quote from Maslow. He was talking about how we are taught to inhibit our need for safety. And of course, like I said, safety is the second rung up. So it's basically at the bottom of the hierarchy. And he said, adults in our society have been taught to inhibit the reactions to threats or dangers at all costs. And then so I was thinking about that. And then I was also thinking about how the mass media is pretty much hell bent on keeping us scared all the time.
Yep.
And so you
Yep.
just wonder, it's like, why is our society structured that way? And when he's talking about that we're taught to inhibit our need for safety, I guess the way I would think of that is like, even from a young age, you're told like, oh, don't be afraid of that. Don't worry about that. Like if you're scared there's a monster in your bed or something, then your parents are like, oh, don't worry about that. There's no monster. Instead of just letting you be afraid of it and seek out like some real solution to feeling safe, they just suppress that feeling.
Oh yeah. Hey, look,
But we do that to each other all the time, where we try to like minimize other people's fears.
Sheesh, I'm doing that with my daughter right now. She's always scared of monsters. And I'm like, there's no monsters.
Which, I mean,
Maybe.
in the moment, you just want to go to sleep. So,
Yeah, I'm just like, go to bed. I'm tired.
in that case, your physiological needs are overpowering your need to be self-actualized.
Jeez, yeah. I love it. That's great.
But so I mean, you think of that, of how often we do tell people like, why are you so worried about that? There's nothing to worry about. What are you being scared of? And so instead of just letting people be scared, like and so anyways, I mean, those are some of my thoughts. I don't know what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a great question. And I think it's because, as you said, it's like this, the physiological needs are pretty damn powerful. And I think the people in power and society have figured out, all right, well, the easiest way to control the masses is to appeal to this, to those bottom kind of basic needs at the bottom of the pyramid, And what I kept thinking about and coming back to was like fear, and how various governments or various groups over time in history have used fear to almost kind of bring people back down to those needs for safety. Like I kept thinking about, even with the Third Reich and the Nazi regime, it's like it was all about how can we take this group of people, the Jews, and almost paint this picture that they will take your safety from you, your ability to make money, your ability to feed your families. So, some people went, oh my gosh, like my physiological needs are at risk. So I'm prepared to, jump on board with this clearly terrible, horrible regime because it's protecting me. And it'd be used in so many other ways. But it also made me think about what's happening with COVID-19 or even coming up to the anniversary of 9/11, right?
Yeah.
Is then it almost creates this like subculture in society that wants to like push against the regime so much, right? Where they say 9/11 was a conspiracy by the government to take control, or COVID is a conspiracy to take control. So it almost can be stretched too far, because I think we do need to scrutinize those decision makers, but we also need to kind of think at that higher level, as to, because I think people can just get so swept up in these conspiracy theories, and you just think, no, if we really think rationally about this, you're just getting a little bit too carried away, I think. So it's caused a couple of different problems there, I think. But yeah, I just think it's all power politics. And it's true. Like, if I'm in power, I'm going to use the media I'm going to use Google and Facebook and algorithms and things. I'm going to use that to keep myself there. I don't want you self-actualizing, because then you'll realize
Right,
that
exactly.
it's all a load of bullshit. And
Exactly right.
then you won't buy as much of my stuff, and I won't be
That's
a
exactly the
multi.
point I was going to make, is that's the other part
Yep,
of it. Because
yep,
people consume things that they need for their physiological and safety needs. You
yep.
don't need to consume anything for your other needs, really. I mean,
No, you don't.
you do to a point, but not as much. Like your physiological and your safety needs require a lot of consumption.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, yeah, exactly. You want to keep people down there so they keep buying whatever crap you're trying to sell them.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I get it. Like I look at those people who are the big influencers in society, and all I can think is like, you don't need that much money.
Yeah.
Like you've got more money than you could ever spend in 10 lifetimes. But at the end of the day, I guess like that's another thing, isn't it? It's like, well, I don't know, you and I have never been in that position where we're
Not
basically
yet. No.
controlling the world. So maybe we'd be doing the same thing.
I think so, because I think that's, yeah, and I think it's weird. I think it would become almost a different level of safety. Like, okay, like the more money you have, all of a sudden your level that you need to feel safe has changed.
Yes,
So I don't
that's
know.
a good
I'll throw
point.
out a number. Say you're making $50,000 one year, and you're like, man, if I could only make $60,000, I'd be on top of the world. Then you're making
Mm,
$60,000, and you're like, now you don't feel safe there, and you feel like you need, it's like, and I think we've all kind of experienced that in different ways, and it doesn't necessarily
yeah,
have to do with money, but where you get the one thing that you thought that would just solve all your problems, and you feel completely safe if you had that number, and that's not the
yeah,
number. Like that number doesn't exist.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
believe. Because even these people, yeah, because even these millionaires, they're still out there wanting more, 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 more. Like they want to make more, they want to grow their companies more, and it's like, how much more? Like especially you think of like
Well,
Amazon, it's like how much? And this is a perfect one to pick on. How much more do you need to grow this company, really?
yeah.
So obviously there is no level that
No.
you are never gonna be able to satisfy your safety need, apparently, because
Well, I heard I heard somebody speaking recently. I don't know if it was Laurie Santos, who's like a professor at Yale. She's like the well-being happiness guru. Like she's got
okay,
this course that is called The Science of Well-being,
okay,
and which has been downloaded like 31 million times, because I think it touches on these big things.
okay.
But I think it was her or somebody she was talking to was talking about like this cohort of like millionaires, right? And their problems are like, oh, like life is so hard. I just wish I could get into the billionaires club,
Right.
and that's their big issue. And for
Yeah,
them, that's a huge
it
issue.
is.
They are consumed by it.
Yeah.
And so here we are laughing, being like, oh my gosh, like, get over yourself. But it is their
It's
big
real
issue.
though. Yeah.
Again, because there is no ceiling to
Yeah.
that, and I think it was in that other video we watched recently. I can't remember the name of the guy, but Amanda and I watched this speech called This is Water.
Oh gosh.
Um,
What was
what
it?
was the name of the fella? I've completely forgotten his name.
I don't know. I'll
Oh,
see.
no, I'll just Google it because otherwise it's going to annoy me.
Yeah, I
So
know.
this is
I'm
Water
gonna say
by,
Anthony Michael Hall. That's not it.
there you go, David Foster Wallace.
David, I knew his three names. David Foster Wallace. Yeah.
Yeah. So check that out because that's an amazing video and we both loved it.
Yeah.
But he was talking about like if you become like a slave to things like money and power and intellect, his specific thing is like, if you're a slave to money, you will always feel like you don't have enough. If you're a slave to power, you'll never be powerful enough. If you are a slave to intellect, you'll never be
Yeah.
smart enough. And that's the truth. So I think we've just got to be aware society is built to keep those in power, and it is our responsibility to try and break out of that mold, because otherwise we'll just be stuck in the rat race, I
Yes.
think.
Yes. Especially for
Yeah.
those of us who don't want to settle anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We're not settling.
Exactly.
We're not getting into that.
So no, that's a great way to wrap that section up. So thank you very much. That's perfect.
No worries.
All right, next one. All right. Is the only thing standing between us and consciousness hunger? I love this one. Well,
That's so
because
interesting.
Well, because we talk about consciousness a lot on the show, and Adam and I talk about it a lot behind the scenes. And so, um, when I read this, and I'll give the quote here from, now I'm thinking Tolle, but I'll give the quote from Maslow. And what's the quote from Tolle? Uh, Now, when I was reading this quote, I was just like, oh my gosh, that's so perfect. So, what he said in this paper was consciousness is almost completely preempted by hunger. And I'm like, oh my God,
Mm.
that's so true. But I mean, I just loved it. And of course, he was talking about physical hunger. And he was going back to someone who's chronically hungry. It's like when you're chronically hungry, all you can do is think about food. And so you're not conscious of what's going on around you. You're not conscious of your other feelings other than hunger. You're not conscious of what the needs of the people around you are. You're not conscious of wanting to be loved or any of that. All you can think of is food. And so that's what he was talking about, is that, and basically saying if you weren't meeting your physiological needs, you weren't going to be able to reach any level of consciousness. And that makes a lot of sense. But
Mm.
I think it could apply to any kind of hunger. So it doesn't, I would think it doesn't have, and that kind of feeds into, and we didn't plan this, but that kind of piggybacks on what you were just talking about. It's like if you have some hunger that's not being met, you're never going to be able to realize consciousness. Like if you have a
Mm.
hunger for money, you have a hunger for prestige, you have a hunger for power, or whatever that hunger is, you're never going to satiate it fully unless you become conscious. And it's going to be so hard to become conscious as long as you're chasing whatever you're chasing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I wrote down here that as long as we're hungering for something, we can never feel like we are all that we can be, which is what
Mm.
Maslow would say.
Yeah. Yeah. I love Maslow. He's so interesting.
I know he's awesome, but so what are your thoughts on consciousness there?
Well, I had to ask the question though, like,
Yeah,
don't we break the cycle of hungering for something by being conscious?
yeah, right.
Because I even thought about with hunger, right? So I read this diet book, which hasn't worked yet. Maybe I'm not ready for it. Like, I don't know. I'm hungering for food too much. But in this book, right, talking specifically about hunger, I don't think you or I or anyone around us really in this privileged society, I don't think we've ever really experienced
No,
true hunger.
I have not.
Um,
No.
but we've certainly experienced the fear of experiencing hunger, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and that's what he says in this book. He's like, you should experience hunger. He's like, it's good for us to experience hunger. And it's this idea of what causes us, say, to overeat is because we constantly like, oh no, I don't want to be hungry, so I just keep eating, eating, eating. And he's like, whereas if you kind of step back and like make a conscious decision, am I like actually hungry or am I just fearing that
Yeah,
I'll be hungry, you know?
right.
And so that's the thing. I think it's even with physical hunger, I think we need to be conscious. I'm certainly no poster boy for that because,
Yeah,
as soon as I go to the supermarket, I'm like, what snacks can I buy today? Because, so it's like an unconscious decision. Maybe it's to do with I could say the way the supermarket's laid out makes me want to eat snacks
true.
more.
But yeah, it does. Yeah.
But yeah, so that was something that I wanted to ask you, and I think you covered it before, but like, I don't know, it's tricky. I'm like, so he's saying that you need to meet your physiological needs before you move into consciousness, but then I'm like, I almost feel like you need to be conscious so as not to be a slave to those
For sure.
physiological needs, maybe.
Well, he was talking about extreme, like he's
Yeah.
talking about extreme hunger, or
Okay.
in this case, or say like an extreme lack of resources of some. Well, that would be safety, I guess. So
Yeah.
yeah, hunger would probably be, or like shelter, safety, water, lack of water, bad air. Like if you were
Mm.
somewhere that was really polluted, like I don't know, toxic,
Yeah.
live near a toxic place. So he's talking about a very extreme case, and I can see in that case that you're not going to become conscious until that need is met. I mean,
No, that's very true. Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
no, so that's what he was talking about. But then I started thinking of it in a different way. And I think you're right that like the kind of hungers we're talking about, like even if it's a physical hunger that we would have, or whether it's a hunger for success or hunger even just for love or whatever you're hungering for, it is kind of a double-edged sword almost, because, or a catch 22 almost, because you can't come out of that without becoming conscious, but it is hard to become conscious when you're in it because you're so focused on that one thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like,
Uh,
no, how do you break that? And I guess, unfortunately, I think most of the time, at least this is what happened for me, and I think the only way you break that is you have to hit some sort of wall. You had to have some kind of upset in your life that makes you reevaluate where things are. 'Cause I
mm,
don't know that you come out of that without some major life, some major shift in your life
I agree.
that was
Yeah.
put on you, like a shift you didn't choose, like
Yes.
something that you just all of a sudden had to deal with. I don't think that you come out of that cycle of hunger otherwise.
I think you're right. I'm pretty sure I had the same thought. And I mean, we've kind of talked about that. It's like, yeah, like someone having a marriage breakdown. You
Yeah.
know, like that's a good. You don't expect it, and then your life kind of is thrown into this upheaval, and it is. You kind of almost have to go through some life altering event, whatever it could be, and it does break you out of that cycle because there'd be so many people, you know, who have say like a near death experience or
Sure. Yeah.
you know, or like, or maybe they get like a terminal illness or something, and that's when they come out of that cycle.
Yeah.
But I guess it's like, yeah, you almost want to try and kickstart, and I think that's why there's a lot of like people out there in society trying to teach this, but it's kind of been lost along the way because of the whole money thing again. But
Yeah.
people trying to teach you to wake up without having one of these big life altering
Yeah.
events, because
And I just don't know if it's possible. I really don't.
yeah,
It's got to be possible. I mean, anything's possible, but it's so easy to just, and I guess that's a safety thing, is it's so easy to just stay in the pattern that you're in.
yeah.
And there's such a pull to do that, like an inner pull, not Interpol, but a pull inside of you that makes you just want to stay in that place.
Yeah.
But gosh, until you're really forced to re-examine it, I don't know. Unless I think there are some people. Well, here's the other thing that we've talked about before too, is like we've talked about kind of reincarnation and coming back, and like
Mm.
I remember we were talking about like, well, maybe every time you go through this world, you get a little better every time, and you become a little more enlightened every time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe there's some people that come in more enlightened because they've
Yeah.
already been through this cycle so many times.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
I
other than
I'm with you.
that,
I'm with you on that. I cannot see unless, yeah, you are one of those people who've maybe had 5 past lives,
yeah, and so you've
and you
already
have come in as like a spiritual guru. I don't know how, without a life altering event, that you will break that cycle
right,
because there is a lot. That's the whole reason why Eckhart Tolle wrote that book because he's like, we need a spiritual awakening. He's like, the planet is just full of people who are not conscious. But, as he said, the more people that become conscious, the easier it is for the collective to become conscious.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I just think there are so many people that are slaves to, just being part of that cycle of hunger. They can't break out of it. So
yep.
it's interesting. Oh, I love this topic. It's
I
it's
know.
interesting.
It is. And I guess that possibly could be, like say you went to see Totally speak.
Yeah.
It just really moved you. Maybe that could be a life-changing event, but I almost feel like you'd have to already be open to it somehow, though. Because
Well, that's what he says, isn't it?
off to it.
Even by reading his book, he's like, some people read this book and change, others will read it and think it's a load of nonsense. So, yeah.
Or even if they believe it, it's still, you get done reading it and you still just continue doing what you were doing before.
Yeah.
You. That's what people
We've all done that. We've all been to a
done
lecture
that.
or
Yes, we all
something.
do that. So
Well, Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you. Like, I can remember many times, like, going and watching someone speak or watching a YouTube video
Yeah,
back in the day, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing. But within a couple of days, a couple of
yeah,
weeks, I'd forget about it, and I wouldn't
right.
practice what they were telling you.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah,
you weren't,
yep.
yeah, you weren't hungry enough, I guess, for
I wasn't
you
hungry
weren't
enough.
hungry enough for change. There you go.
Yeah, yeah,
You have to
exactly right. Yeah,
stop hungering for whatever you're hungering for and start hungering for change. There you go.
yeah. I like it. That could be. That's the title of this video.
Hunger
Yep.
for change. All right, next question. Oh, this is a good one too. Is
Mm,
a sick man the product of a sick society? So the quote that spawned this question was, and this is his words too. He said he's going to make the bold postulation that a man who is thwarted in any of his basic needs may fairly be envisaged simply as a sick man. And then he went on to say, just as if he were lacking vitamins and minerals. And of course, I never thought about it that way, but when you hear that though or read that, it's like it makes a lot of sense that
does.
people who are not having their needs met, all these needs met, they are sick in a way, but we don't look at it the same way, and we don't give it the same not precedence. What am I trying to say? Like the same priority as we give health. Well, and you know this full well because you're studying mental health issues.
Hmm.
As a society, we don't give mental health issues nearly the same credence that we give to physical issues.
No,
And
definitely.
so,
Yeah.
it does make a lot of sense when you think about it. That yeah, if you aren't having your needs met, you are in a way sick. And so then I have another question, kind of a sub question, that if you are settling for an unfulfilling life, is it because that's what society is offering you? Because
Mm,
he said a sick man is a product of a sick society. So if that's all society is offering you are things to increase, not increase isn't the word, but I guess produce the sickness and also to make it last longer.
mm.
And that's kind of what we've been talking about. Some of the things that society offers you do keep you from meeting your needs.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think we're all sick, and we're just at differing levels of sickness.
Sure.
And some people know they're sick, and other people don't know they're sick.
Well, that's
So, like,
yeah.
yeah, like I think, I think even you and I, like, we like to think, we've been on a pretty good journey of self-discovery, and
Yeah.
but we're still afflicted by the sickness because we have difficult days
Yeah.
where because we're human beings, I guess. But I think, like, I think it is because of society. I think it's almost, in a way, you're like in this toxic fog, right? And, like, in a way, you kind of almost get this. I don't know. I'm coming up with this on the spot, so I could
Okay.
completely
I'm
fail.
ready. I'm
But
ready.
you're in this fog, say, and then you've got this, almost this lantern that's kind of like shining a light around you, right? But then
Yeah.
sometimes that light, that might, like, that flame might extinguish, and then you're back in the fog, and you're like, but the difference is almost like we can kind of get that light back a little bit
Okay.
quicker, maybe, than we could have in the past.
Yeah.
Whereas I think so many people are just in that fog, and there's no way out. They're just stuck in there. They don't even know they're in a fog,
Yeah.
you know? And so I think that's almost where we're at. We are, because we're thwarted in so many ways. Like, I'd say, if you're a homeless person, you're
Mhm.
certainly thwarted in the fact that, okay, maybe our systems are not good enough to deal with the housing crisis, or we don't know how to help somebody get back on their feet when they're homeless, or whatever it may be.
Right.
There's that's a sickness in society that certainly needs to be dealt with. But even at the level of, people, feeling thwarted in all their other needs, like, but
Right.
maybe at a higher level. So I don't know. I want your thoughts on that, because I just had a thought about that then. Think about that then.
About what? About the light?
Well, yeah, just about in general, that we're all sick, because I think we're all
Oh, oh,
sick.
oh, oh, oh. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. And you know what I was thinking about while you were talking about it? I don't know how much you know about the American Indians. So people who don't know this, so Adam is from Australia. I'm from the United
Yep.
States. So, but like the American Indians were very in touch with, or I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but with the earth, and like they were very community driven, and like they took care of the tribe. Like they would fight each other. I mean, tribes would fight each other. So I mean, there's some sign that they were sick.
Mm.
But I'm thinking of them as being maybe a good example of not being sick, because within their tribe they would take care of each other, they took care of the land. They had their values that they all subscribed to and believed in. And I think what I would picture is, they had their different hierarchies within the tribe, and so everybody kind of knew where they fit in. And I mean, I think that's probably about as good of an example of a healthy society as you can get.
Yeah.
And then as you start adding other people to the mix that don't share the same values, of course you're going to become sick. But I don't
Mm.
know that that's necessarily a bad thing. Well, I mean, it's a bad thing in the moment, but really, you think, especially in the United States, and I don't know how it is in Australia, but like the United States, there's so many different nationalities here, all trying to, all different values, all different religions. Like that's why a lot of people come here, is for freedom of religion and freedom to believe what they want to believe. And
Mm.
so you have so many people trying to come together in one society and then all be governed by one government.
Mm.
That's a tall order.
Yeah,
And so
definitely.
really, I don't know if you know who Jon Stewart is. He
No,
hosts
no.
the Daily Show, and
Oh,
he's
okay.
also a
Yep.
stand-up comedian and stuff. But I heard him say this once, like and that's where kind of where I'm getting it from. But he was he's saying it's really amazing that we're doing as well as we are when you consider that. And like,
Mm.
really, yeah.
Yeah,
And so
that's true.
I don't know if that. So I mean, I think we've created this sickness ourselves, or our ancestors did, just by wanting in the see, because they were hungering for something else. Like they had their needs probably all met where they were, except
Yeah.
for, well, they didn't have their I mean, a lot of people came here because of freedom of religion. um so say they didn't have that need met, but I think probably a lot of their other needs were being met, although that's not always the case either, because a lot of people come to the United States too because just for more opportunity. I don't know. I feel like we created the sickness though because we were wanting something beyond what
Mm.
what our life was offering, or our ancestors. I'm talking now. When I say our, I'm talking about our
That's
ancestors. It's like we created that sickness because we wanted something more, and maybe we shouldn't have wanted something more. Maybe we should have just found a way to
ooh,
make the best of what we had.
that's interesting. I like that. Yeah, it was almost like, because as you said, you're in this tribe, most of your needs are met. You certainly have probably your community needs
Yeah,
or like belonging needs met a lot more so than we have today. Um, and I'm sure you'd have a lot more, a lot less distraction, so more time to probably find out who you are and self-actualize. But then, yeah, like what was it within that tribe or different tribes in general that made everyone want to come together? It's like yeah, we have created that sickness, and now it's so complex. We don't know how to
right.
unravel that. We can't go back to being a bunch of tribes.
But right.
Like
No,
I
exactly.
guess some people do try and do that. They do try and create little tribes
Right.
elsewhere, but it's kind of like we've opened Pandora's box now, and we can't really come back. So I don't know. But I wonder. Like I've always thought about this, right? Which is, it's
Yeah.
like these conditions of society are the most difficult to possibly. How do you get self-actualized? Which we'll talk about a bit more in the next one. But how do you get self-actualized in this, in this society? It's really hard
It is.
because everything is against you. But part of me believes, if we are all part of this this consciousness, this stream of consciousness that I've talked about before, I feel these are the best conditions with which to really add knowledge and experience and energy to that consciousness field. Because, never have we been tested under such difficult situations. So if you can possibly bust through all that crap that society's telling you and actually get self-actualized, that's a lot more powerful, I think, than if you were to just get self-actualized in a small tribe. I don't know.
Definitely a lot harder. Yeah. And anything that's harder typically is going to be more valuable in the end.
Yeah.
Typically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. I like
All
it.
right. Number 4.
Who knew we'd end up there? But that's where we ended up.
I know. I think we're doing well. We're solving the problems.
Yes, of course. That's what we do here. We solve all the world's problems. All right. So this is a question that's been on my mind a lot because the expectation gap. So I haven't talked about that lately, but like that's my blog / nonprofit organization, and my whole premise of that is basically to empower people to become self-actualized. Basically, I mean that's not exactly the wording I use, and so I've been thinking about, well, what does self-actualization actually mean? And like I'm trying to create my own definition for it. So that's kind of why I want to have this discussion, because I want you to help me come up with a definition.
Yeah, no worries.
So the question is
just a simple thing.
I know. So the question is, what does it mean to be self-actualized, and is self-actualization even possible? And then I have a couple quotes from I keep wanting to say totally. A couple of quotes from Maslow just to give his take on what it means. So he says, this is kind of a long quote here, but even if all your needs are satisfied, we may still often, if not always, expect that a new discontent and restlessness will soon develop, unless the individual is doing what he is fitted for. A musician must make music, an artist must paint, a poet must write, if he is to be ultimately happy. What a man can be, he must be. This need we may call self-actualization. So like he's saying, yeah, you can meet all your needs, but if you're not doing what you were put on this earth to do, you're not going to ever be happy. So, and then he also says self-actualization needs are the desire to become more and more what one is, to become everything one is capable of becoming. So that's Maslow's definition. I'm curious, I have my own kind of definition that I've kind of come up with, but I'm curious to know yours before I spoil it. Or an idea?
This is tricky. Yeah. When I read this question, what I thought about was, again, kind of what I talked about before, like all the roadblocks in the way of self-actualization, whether it's the physiological needs, society. I thought about the shadow, and how the shadow kind of gets in the way as well of self-actualizing.
Yep.
And people in general, I just think all of those things make it very hard to self-actualize. Yes. But from a self-actualization point of view, what it means, I think I know it sounds a bit silly, but I think it's beyond the realms of language. I think language doesn't do it justice.
Okay, that's fair.
I think it's our best attempt at explaining something that I don't know how to kind of phrase it, but I think it's Maslow's probably gotten the closest to kind of capturing what it is, what that next state is. Yeah. Because I think the other needs are quite easy to define, whereas this is hard to define, but he's like, I need to acknowledge the fact that that's probably the top, that's where we all want to get to.
Yep.
But yeah, it feels like it's something that you feel inside that you're like, I am doing the right thing. Like, I know I am living the life that I'm meant to, but it's so easy to try and define it, right? So even me saying, okay, now I feel like my purpose in life is to help people, right? And for me, I tried to create, for me, I went, okay, I need to figure out, well, what does that mean ultimately? Okay, it's how can I help businesses create psychologically safe workplaces? because that'll reach the most people, and
Yeah.
those people will be happy, and thus, it's going to help the collective consciousness in the best way.
Effect. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was how I, as a human being, tried to define, what I'm here for. But the problems with that is, you know, you can get caught up in the money trap. Will I make enough money from this, or am I appealing to the important people in this field enough, and da da da. So you can easily get swept off that path.
Yep.
And that's why it's such an elusive thing. I think we only touch self-actualization very, I don't know, not often, I guess. It's my kind of weird way of explaining it.
Well, and I think you probably are partly there, but to become 100%, like to get that to be 100%, when we were talking about the percentages earlier, man, yeah, that's pretty difficult. And I don't even know. Yeah, I'm not sure that it's really 100% possible when you are, because you too would have to discount all your outside influence. Because you are saying, okay, there's something, because we all are suited for certain things more than others. I mean, that's obvious. Everybody's better at some things than other things. But even knowing that, even knowing what you're good at, it's just like natural to want to be good at what other people are good at. So like, so I'll give an example, I guess. Like I think I'm a good writer. I'll say I'm a good writer. I mean, whether people
I think so.
whatever. So like I know I'm good at that, but I would still like to be better at public speaking, for example. So that's like partly why I started recording myself and things. Instead of just focusing on the writing. Like maybe if I only focused on the writing, I would become self-actualized in that. But it's like that's just such a weird need. That's another need, I guess, maybe, of people, is that, or that's more of a want, I guess. That gets to my definition. But anyway, yeah, because you want to be good at what other people are good at, not just what you're good at.
Yeah.
Competition thing, maybe, because we were talking about that before we started recording, about how at least the United States and Australia, obviously not all parts of the world are completely competitive or as competitive, but obviously our countries are very competitive countries and very competitive cultures. So I mean, that maybe that's what plays into it too. And so you have to take all that competitiveness that's been ingrained in you. You have to take that out of the equation, because you're just doing something that's good for you. It doesn't have to be better than the other person.
Yeah. Well, I think as well, it's like the tricky part is like when it becomes about, it's not just about the writing, going, I am enjoying the writing. It's, I want this to go somewhere. So I want to be recognized as a good writer.
True.
And then you become a good writer and you win a Nobel Prize in literature or something. I don't know. But you know what I mean? There's always going to be, that's one of the problems I feel, is where it becomes less about the enjoyment of writing itself to the wanting and the hunger for someone to recognize that. It's not enough. I don't think it's enough for us to feel recognized in ourselves. Like, you recognize you're a good writer, but then you are still going to crave somebody else saying that you're a good writer. And it's the same with me. Is like, I feel knowledgeable about this topic that I've moved into, but I still like it when people call me out for that. It makes me feel validated. But I just think we've got to be so careful about the whole validation thing, because that's where you just slip down that path of ego and other problems.
Yeah, because it's nice to have some of it, but not to depend on it. Like, you want some validation, but you don't want that to be like, you're so dependent on it that you have to have 100% validation from everybody. But no, well, maybe this would be a good way to wrap up this section, because we're kind of coming back to the definition I came up with, which is Well, what I wrote down was that self-actualization equals the lack of want. And I said, whenever any other need is met, you find yourself wanting something else. And so you constantly have another need. Once you get to the point of not wanting anything else, I think that's when you're self-actualized.
Oh, yeah, good one. I like it.
And now, how the heck you get there, I don't know yet. I'm working on it, but
Feels like a Buddhist thing, like
yeah, true.
those like like the Dalai Lama. I don't think that man wants anything.
Yeah.
So
Right, exactly. So that's where we'll end this discussion. Self-actualization equals the lack of want.
yeah, I like it. Well done. Good definition. I'm validating your definition.
Oh yeah, I needed that. Thank you. Any final thoughts or anything before we?
No, I really enjoyed it. I think we
had enough thoughts
interesting
today. I'm done thinking. So.
And I just want to recognize too, so because people don't know, I know this. Amanda got this white paper, a fair while ago, and she has sat there really critically reading through it.
Yeah.
So I know that these questions have really come from a focused, reading and understanding and analysis of Maslow's work. So well done.
Thank you. Well, I will also say, I'll share how much of a dork I am. So I was on a camping trip. Like I was on a week-long camping trip, and I had some time to myself. I'm sitting by the water in my lawn chair, just relaxing with my coffee. And what am I doing? I'm reading Maslow, this theory of, or what is it called? Theory of human motivation. I'm sitting there reading, analyzing it, and having the time of my life. And I'm like,
You're a nerd. Yep.
I'm such a dork.
Yeah, I love it. That's good though. I appreciate it.
So on that note, we will say thank you for sticking around with us. If you've gotten this far, we appreciate you watching, listening, and you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music. You can email us at cheerstонotsettling@gmail.com. You can also get a hold of us on LinkedIn. You can hop on over to Coffee and give us as little as $1 to help us keep this thing going and get some new equipment and all that good stuff. I think that's it. So we just say until next time, cheers to not selling.
Cheers to not selling. Bye.
Here.